ओम पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. So welcome to our Saturday morning session. Last week, I'm sorry for that. We could not have the session because of my travel. But we will continue on chapter 8 of Bhagavad Gita from verse number 5 onwards. So let's start. But before we start, let us also recollect that we had a detailed discussion on certain words which are very, very, interesting, like very useful as well. Brahm, we talked about Brahm. Then we talked about Adhibhut, we talked about Adhidev and Adhiyak. These are very, fundamental words in spiritual language, and that will help us throughout our journey. So now we go on verse number 5. जो पुरुष अंत काल में मुझको ही स्मरण करता हुआ शरीर को त्याग कर जाता है वह मेरे साक्षात स्वरूप को प्राप्त होता है इसमें कोई संशय नहीं है. Now this is a very, very interesting verse, and here Lord Krishna says कोई संशय नहीं है वो मेरे स्वरूप को ही प्राप्त होता है. But this verse has also caused a lot of confusion and a lot of misunderstanding. This verse says अंत काल में जो मेरे स्वरूप को याद करता हुआ स्मरण करता हुआ शरीर को त्याग कर देता है. So a lot of people thought that we don't have to remember the Almighty rest of our lives. We will remember Him at the last, few days of our journey in this world. And that time we can ask, some Pandit to come and recite Bhagavad Gita, or he can chant certain mantras of Vedas, and they can give me Ganga water, and then I will be completely, liberated. Now that is a very bad misconception, because firstly, Krishna doesn't say that somebody else should smaran me. He tells that you should remember me. The person who is, departing from this world, he is the one who should remember him, not a Pandit sitting in his room and reciting mantras. That is not the way he has said here. Secondly, he has immediately clarified this version in the next verse, because he must have realized that people might misunderstand it. And in fact, without taking recourse to the next verse, people still misunderstand this particular verse. And I have seen many people, they very clearly say, in Hindi they say, अभी तो जन्म जी लेते हैं, अभी तो संसार भोग लेते हैं, लास्ट के जब अंत समय आएगा उस समय भगवान का स्मरण कर लेंगे. That is the approach they adopt. And this approach is adopted by many, many people, even people who are learned, people who are well educated, even they feel that way. And this is the approach which has actually led to a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of, I would say, irreligious activities have happened because of this. Because people disregarded this next verse, verse number 6, which is actually a condition on the verse number 5. So let us read that verse also right now. हे कुंती पुत्र अर्जुन, यह मनुष्य अंत काल में जिस जिस भाव को भी स्मरण करता हुआ शरीर को त्याग करता है उसी भाव को प्राप्त होता है, क्योंकि सदा उसी भाव से भावित रहता है. Now he says that whatever you remember throughout your life, whatever you do in rest of your life, the same bhav prevails at the time of your death. The word which has been used here is worth looking at. The word here is tadbhav bhavita. Tadbhav bhavita means the bhav which has been dominating your life also dominates your thought process at the very end of your life. So you cannot, you know, be greedy rest of your life and avoid that greed at the end. That is not possible. You have been aspiring to become rich and powerful rest of your life. How can you avoid that thought at the end of your life and remember the Almighty? That is not possible. That is what he has said in this word, that whatever you keep doing rest of your life, the same thing predominantly comes to your thought process at the end of your life. This is extremely important, and that is why he says that, you know, if you continue to do, if you continue to remember the Almighty throughout your life, at the end, when you are going to die, that thought process will also come to your mind, and then you will be liberated from this cycle of birth and death forever. So, this is extremely important to understand, that you cannot do it just at the end of the life. It is a continuous process. You have to do throughout your life. Then, automatically, at the end of your life, your thought process will be impacted by that process. Now, the time of death is extremely important, because how a person dies and in what conditions he dies actually is determined by his actions throughout his life. And not only that, at the time of death, a seed is formed for the new life. If you are not liberated, then obviously the seed will bring you to the new life. And how that seed will be formed, that is also very important. Now, that seed is formed based on the balance of your karmas. Whatever you have done, like at the end of the year, an organization makes a balance sheet. These are the debits, these are the credits, these are the income, these are the expenditure, and this is the final, balance of the institution or an organization. Similarly, at the time of death, this balance sheet is automatically formed inside our, mental frame, and that balance goes into the seed for the next birth, and that is extremely important. And therefore, at the time of death, we normally do remember only those things on which we have been working throughout our life. This is the process. So that is why he next verse he again continues in the same wavelength to explain it further. The next verse is also an explanation of verse number 5. इसलिए हे अर्जुन, तू सब समय में निरंतर मेरा स्मरण कर और युद्ध भी कर। मेरा स्मरण कर निरंतर, सब समय में, और युद्ध भी कर। इस प्रकार मुझ में अर्पण किए हुए मन बुद्धि से युक्त होकर तू निसंदेह मुझको प्राप्त होगा। नाउ दीज आर द टू कंडीशंस हियर। निरंतर मेरा स्मरण कर और युद्ध भी कर, एंड मन बुद्धि को समर्पित करके, युक्त होकर के। नाउ लेट अस अंडरस्टैंड दिस प्रॉपरली। नाउ हाउ कैन यू रिमेंबर द गॉड व्हेन यू आर फाइटिंग ए वॉर? Normally what we do, we set aside a time for ourselves, that this is the time I'll do my prayer, and rest of the time we become busy with our worldly activities. That is the normal thing most of the people do in life. Now he is saying that हर समय निरंतर मेरा स्मरण कर और युद्ध भी कर. Now, how can you remember the Almighty when you are fighting in the middle of a war, a big war? Now, it obviously means Krishna is not referring to the normal way of prayer which we adopt in the world. He's referring to something different. He is not saying that you identify a specific time for me and then you pray for me. He's saying all the time you do that. Like we keep breathing all the time. We keep breathing in and out all the time. And still we are, doing all our worldly activities. The breathing does not interfere in our worldly activities. Similarly, the prayer of the Almighty should not interfere in our worldly activities. In fact, it should become part of our worldly activities. It should become integrated into our daily routine. Now, how it can be done? I'll give you two examples to explain it. Firstly, if we realize that this whole universe is nothing but an expansion of the Almighty, then we will feel that whatever we are doing within the ambit of the Almighty. This he has already referred earlier also, that you should make your karma as yajna. That is the word he has used earlier in one of the verses. कर्मों को यज्ञ स्वरूप बना दो. Now, this is what he's again explaining here, that we don't have to sit aside, sit in a temple or in a separate place or go into a jungle or go into a forest and then, pray for the Almighty. That is not needed. You can continue to do your daily routine, but keep thinking that this whole universe is an expanse of the Almighty, and whatever I am doing, I am dedicating to Him. Even if I have to fight a war, I am dedicating that action in the war to the Almighty. Then this action becomes yajna. That is what he said earlier. And now he is explaining it further that yudh bhi kar or mere ko smaran bhi kar means that you dedicate this war to me, that the whole expanse is the Almighty, and whatever is happening because of Him. So I am also doing this to the as directed by the Almighty. So if we have that feeling constantly, whatever action we do, whether we are engaged in pursuit of a business, whether we are engaged in pursuit of some social activity, whether we are engaged in pursuit of political career, whatever we do, if we dedicate it to the Almighty, that I am doing it because the Almighty has, directed me to do so, and I am doing it for the good of the people, I think that is what he means here, because you cannot set aside time in the war. He is taking the example that युद्ध भी कर और निरंतर स्मरण कर, तो how can you do that together then? It's not possible. So that is the purpose, is basically that remember him all the time, dedicate all the activities to him as we do the यज्ञ of karma, कर्मों का यज्ञ करें और परमात्मा को समर्पित कर दें. So this is what he is referring to here. And then he is talking in the next part of the same verse, इस प्रकार मुझ में अर्पण किए हुए मन बुद्धि से युक्त होकर. मन और बुद्धि, these are, not easy thing to understand. Mind is constantly changing. Movement, its basic attribute, movement, all the time, moving. When we try to meditate, we try to keep that movement still. But there is a resistance all the time. Mind keeps moving and we try to resist and we keep it in one place. Similarly, the buddhi, the intellect comes out with dissection. It tries to analyze things by, dividing them and coming to a conclusion what is good and what is not good, what is beneficial, what is not beneficial. It comes out with that approach. So what happens is that most people do that, whether prayer of the Almighty is beneficial for me or not. Is it helping me or not? So we get into a transactional relationship. If something good comes out of me, I pray. If it doesn't come out of me, why should I pray? Now, that is the approach when you apply mind and intellect in the process of prayer. I have heard many people telling that, I will do this particular yajna or particular savamani dedicated to the Almighty if my son gets well. If my son is health is recovered, I'll do this. If he gets employment, I'll do this. If he's able to get married, then I will organize this for that Almighty. Now that is absolutely a transactional approach. You don't do transaction with the Almighty. The power which has brought you in this world, the power which has given you the power of mind and the power of intellect and the power of this body and senses, you don't do transactions with that power. And this is what we are doing all the time, कि भगवान इसको ठीक कर देंगे तो मैं सवामणि कर दूंगा. Now that is completely ridiculous and foolish in my approach, in my way. That is should not be our thinking. Our thinking should be that we surrender our mind and our intellect entirely to the Almighty and let Him do whatever He wants to do. I accept whatever the results are. I am doing my best according to the capabilities He has given to me. The capabilities have been given to me by Him. So I am using those capabilities. I am doing my best and I will accept whatever results come. You don't have to use that transactional approach with the Almighty. And that is what we do most of the time. A large number of people do that approach. So it should be without any transaction. That is what it means, the second part of this verse. That मन और बुद्धि को मेरे को अर्पण करके और फिर continuously keep praying for me. Now, here the prayer or the word here is smaran, not actually prayer. The Sanskrit word is smaran. Now, smaran means that you keep that in mind all the time, constantly. So, one example I gave you is about the accepting the entire universe as expansion of the Almighty, and whatever He is telling us to do or guiding us to do, we continue to do it and dedicate it to Him so that the whole action becomes yak. And that is what he means, the smaran, continuous smaran. That is what. The second example, which is more, worldly, we can understand. Like, take the example of space, Akash. Now, everything exists in this Akash. If there is no Akash, we cannot exist. I cannot exist. Your house cannot exist. Your road cannot exist. Where you are traveling, that area cannot exist. Your friend to whom we are meeting, he cannot exist. This whole world cannot exist. The whole earth cannot exist. Universe cannot exist without Akash. So whatever we do in this Akash. So this is how we look at the expansion of the Almighty. That without Him I cannot do anything. Without Akash, I cannot exist, I cannot move, I cannot have a house, I cannot go to a toilet, I cannot meet a friend, I cannot travel, I cannot walk, I cannot fly, nothing can be done. Because Akash is the prerequisite for that. Similarly, the Almighty is the prerequisite for what all I do. Because my very existence depends on Him. And not only my existence, everybody else's existence depends on Him. So this thought should remain in our mind that the very existence of this whole universe, including myself, is based on Him. And therefore, whatever I do because of Him. Now that smriti, that smaran is what he means here. Otherwise, you cannot do a prayer in a temple and the war together. That's not possible. So this is what he means here, that all the time you remember Him, and that is a real worship of the Almighty. You keep Him in mind that because of him I exist, because of him this whole universe exists, because of him I am performing whatever I am required to perform, and I do with best of my ability, and this becomes my yajna because I dedicate it to him. If we have that feeling, then we are actually performing what he has suggested in verse number 5. Then, without any doubt, we will be liberated at the end of this life, because if we continue to behave like this rest of our life, at the end of our life, that thought will prevail in our mind, and then that will become the cause of our liberation. So, this is what he says here, verse number 5, 6, and 7. These are important from practical life point of view, how we remember him. So you don't have to dedicate a few hours and few minutes for him separately, but you dedicate the entire life to him by remembering him all the time, that my very existence is because of him. Whatever is happening here is because of him. Everybody else is existing because of him. And therefore, whatever I do is all dedicated to him. That should be the approach. And that is what he, in my view, means. मेरा सब काल में स्मरण करो, इसका मतलब यही हो सकता है, और युद्ध भी करो. तो otherwise you cannot do, you cannot fight a war and then pray to the Almighty at the same time, because either you can sit in the temple and pray, or you can fight the war. You can do these two together only in this particular manner. And that is what we do with breathing. We keep breathing in and out. It's an automatic process. And then we keep doing our activity. Similarly, we keep this in mind, that the everything which exists here is because of him. Every action which I am doing is because of him. And he is the guide, and he is the base, and he is the coach. If we keep that in mind, I think we are performing his smaran all the time. That is what I would interpret this particular verse the way it is. Then verse number 8. हे पार्थ, ये नियम है कि परमेश्वर के ध्यान से, अभ्यास रूप योग से युक्त, दूसरी ओर न जाने वाले चित्त से निरंतर चिंतन करता हुआ मनुष्य परम प्रकाश रूप दिव्य पुरुष को या परमेश्वर को प्राप्त होता है. Now he is explaining these three above verses 5, 6, and 7 in terms of the law of nature, in terms of the law which has been set by the Almighty to regulate this world. So he says, ये नियम है. This is the law of this universe, that those people who are constantly dedicating all the things to him, and who are remembering him in every circumstance, who feel that the very existence and the very performance of all activities are because of him, those people naturally, at the time of their death, go to him and unite with him. उस दिव्य पुरुष के पास unite हो जाते हैं. So this is what he is saying here, that because of this law, the other two things which he have mentioned above are applicable. The verse number 5 and verse number 8 are happening because of verse number 8. In verse number 8, he has set a law, like you have set a constitution. So there's a constitution, and then there is an execution of that constitution by the legal authority. For example, you have been given freedom of speech with some restrictions. So the freedom of speech is the constitutional provision, and then its applicability is ensured by the government and by the judiciary. So this is how it works. So here he says the rule is like this, that those who are dedicating everything to the Almighty, Param Purush Divyam Yati, everything dedicated to that Param Purus. Everything, you know, उसी के ध्यान में आप लगे रहते हैं, then obviously the verse number 5, that without any doubt you will also remember him at the fag end of your life, and then you will attain liberation. And the verse number 6 and 7 are explanation in between. So these four verses tell us how we should pray to the Almighty. परमात्मा का स्मरण हमें कैसे करना चाहिए? परमात्मा का स्मरण हमें करना चाहिए constantly, whatever activity we are doing, whatever action is happening, whatever result is coming, we should remember that this is all an expense of the Almighty. It is all happening because of Him. It is all happening because He is guiding the universe that way. If we take it that way, then I think we are performing the condition of remembering Him constantly all the time. So this is how I will look at these four verses. And these verses actually is a practical guide for all of us. How we look at the world will change. Then we will look at the world as divine, because it is all an expense of the Almighty. Srashti and Srashta, the word in Sanskrit are, सृष्टि जो है वो सृष्टा की ही एक रूप है. जो सृष्टा है उसका एक्सपेंशन ही सृष्टि है. That is what the Sanskrit writings explain, and that is what the meaning of divine is, that the Almighty is prevailing. But the another word in English is omnipresent. और हम भी कहते हैं, even in our traditional language we say, कण कण में भगवान है. Now that meaning is that he is all prevailing. ईशावास्यम इदम सर्वम, that परमात्मा का निवास सब जगह है. So this is what, if we remember that part, I think we are fulfilling that condition. We don't have to, constantly sit in a temple and remembering him throughout our life. No, that is not the way. We continue to do our normal activities, but keeping in mind that it is all happening because of him. And this is all, the whole creation is because of him, and all this movement in this world, all the happenings in this world are happening because of him. Now next verse is verse number 9. जो पुरुष सर्वज्ञ, अनादि, सबके नियंता, सूक्ष्म से भी अति सूक्ष्म, सबके धारण पोषण करने वाला, अचिंत्य स्वरूप, सूर्य के सदृश, नित्य चेतन प्रकाश स्वरूप और अविद्या से अति परे है, उस परमात्मा का हम स्मरण करें. नाउ संस्कृत वर्ड इज कविम, पुराणम, सर्वस्य, धातारम, चिंत्य रूप, आदिवर्णम, तमस परस्तात. Now these are the, what you can call them, some of the qualities to describe the supreme power. He has used these words to describe the supreme power. Now kavi means sarvagya, the who knows everything. We cannot be sarvagya. Our knowledge is always alpagya. We know a small little thing. A person whom you consider one of the greatest luminaries in the world cannot know even very small fraction of the world. Just to give you an example, a person may be expert in football, but does he know everything about football alone? Forget about everything else. Now the World Cup is going on. There's so many things which even the experts in football don't know. Even that small segment. Football is not even a small drop in the ocean, in the whole ocean if you look at it. It has so many dimensions. Even the field of sport is so big. Then the field of music is so big. The field of writing is so big. The field of medical science is so big. The field of dance and culture is so big. The field, for example, of astronomy is so big. So there are many, many innumerable fields in this world. The knowledge is enormous. So any one of us, even he may be one of the great luminaries in the world, will know only a small fraction of the knowledge. So we cannot be Sarvagya, we are always Alpagya. But he is Sarvagya. Sarvagya can be only the Almighty who is all pervading. He is the only one who can be Sarvagya. So that is what one quality of the Almighty. The second is Puran, that is Anadi. Anadi means he has eternal, he was never born, he will never die, he has always been there and he will always be there. So it is without any birth, without any death, it's an eternal existence. That is what we describe. That the second quality of that Parampurus, that Almighty. Sabke Niyanta. Niyanta means the person who is setting the rules. He is not rewarding and punishing each one of us. No. Like he said in verse number 8, there's a rule, niyant, there's a niyam hai. Similarly, he has set the rule. For example, there's a rule of gravity. That whatever you throw up, it will come back down on the earth, because so far as the gravity of earth goes, till that point, whatever exists will come back to the earth. If it goes beyond the point of gravity, then it doesn't come back to the earth. So that is a rule he has set. Now it does not regulate each and every object. The rule is followed. It automatically happens. It's always in the auto mode. Similarly, he has said innumerable rules in this world. For example, the rule is that if you put the seed in the earth with appropriate conditions, if you have proper fertilizer, water, and air, sunlight, it will grow and it will grow into a big tree. So that is a rule. The rule is followed, and because of that rule, we do the crops. Crops happen because of that process. So the rule is not enforced individually, but it is a rule which is in auto mode in all sections of our society, in all sections of this universe. So that is what he says, Sabke Niyanta. That is the meaning of Niyanta. He sets the larger constitution that is in operation in this world. So all the rules of nature are set by him. Suksham se bhi ati suksham. Now, how do you say suksham? And somebody say, bigger than the biggest, uh, bigger than the biggest, and smaller than the smallest. We talked about this language of paradox in spirituality. But here, suksham se bhi suksham means, you cannot experience him with your sense organs. Because as the things become smaller and smaller, they go out of your sense perception. Even, for example, Akash. Akash has no color, no shape, no size. So it goes out of your sense perception. You only have a feel of Akash. Similarly, air, for example, air you can feel only with the touch, because this is also very suksham. Mind, for example, you can feel the mind because it gives you the thinking process, but you don't know how to capture it. Which sense organ can see it or smell it or taste it? It's not possible. So the things which in this physical universe are also very suksham, he is suksham se bhi ati suksham. He is smaller than the smallest. In one of the Upanishads, I remember they have described the Almighty. That this is again only an example. That you take the top part of your hair, the smallest tip of your hair, and then break into 100. Then again take one tip of that broken 100. Then again break it into 100, and then again do that. And if you do it several times, whatever is left, the Almighty is even smaller than that. So the meaning of smaller here is that basically he is beyond our sense perception. He is beyond uh, the capacity of our mind and intellect to grasp him. That is what he means. And this power is absolutely insensible, unintelligible. That is what Ati Suksham and Suksham means here. And that is how it works, because everything, as we have seen in our explanations elsewhere, everything ultimately originates from this, what you call non-manifest. अप्रत्यक्ष जो है, the one which is hidden somewhere, which is non-visible, which is non-audible, from there everything audible and visible comes out. So the manifest comes out of this non-manifest. So this is what here the meaning is. Then सबके धारण पोषण करने वाला अचिंत्य स्वरूप, he is the one who looks after everything. How do we get to eat our food? Do we create sunlight? Do we create the fertility of the earth? Do we create a seed? Do we create water? All this has been done by him. We only use these materials to, you know, create a crop for us to have a crop and eat ourselves. So all the fundamentals have been done. Even the knowledge of how to do the cropping has come because of him. So everything comes from him. That is why he looks after us. He is looking after not only the humanity, but the all species of life that exist are, looked after by him. Now look at, we use these, woolen clothes and all that because we have the capability to make it. But look at the birds. They live in the heat and they live in this, very cold weather without any clothing because they are designed that way. The Almighty has designed them that way. Yesterday we were looking at some birds and I saw very, very thin legs, two legs standing. And the body is big. We look at, for example, a peacock. Peacock still has somewhat, strong legs, but there are certain birds which are very big and very, very thin legs. And they sustain themselves quite well. So the Almighty has created so many varieties, so many things, and that has been designed to sustain this world. So he is the one who is sustaining it. Dharan poshan karne wala. And then Chetan Prakash Swarup, that he is the consciousness in everybody. He is the light. He gives you the knowledge. He gives you the consciousness. For example, if I don't have consciousness, I cannot think, I cannot see, I cannot use my intellect. It's not possible. I'm dead. So all that comes from him. So this is what he describes certain qualities of the supreme power in this verse. That ye avidya se ati pare. This is also very important. Tamsa parastat. Tamsa parastat means that the darkness can't even go there. He is beyond that because he is light. Now, darkness can prevail only in the place where there is no light. But he himself is light. He's light. He's like, provides light like the sun, even greater than the sun. And therefore there is no scope for the darkness to prevail there. And that is why he is completely away from the darkness. He is completely away from, all kinds of negativity. That is what he says. So this is what he described the Almighty certain qualities here, which are worth remembering. That is Sarvagya, that he is the only one who can know because he is all pervading. And that is why we call him omniscient. And this omnipresent and omniscient, these two words in English, actually they use the word om. And the om is the word which describes the Almighty, which we have seen in Bhagavad Gita, as well as in some Upanishads, which has been very clearly described. Actually, Mandukya Upanishad describe this word in great detail. Then Anadi, that is eternal. Sabke Niyanta, that he lays out all the basic rules in this universe, the operating principles, and they are all in auto mode. He doesn't, give judgment to individual person. No, they are all in auto mode. They enforce themselves automatically. And then suksham says suksham, that is, we are not able to see him with our senses. The senses cannot perceive him at all. He is far beyond the sense organs, but everything still comes from there. And sabka dharan posan karne wala, it looks after everybody. And then, he is far, far away from any sort of darkness or any sort of what you call tamas or any sort of lack of knowledge. That is impossible because he is like the source of all the lights, all the knowledge is that. Therefore, obviously, he cannot be part. The agyan cannot even go there. It's not possible. So this is how he describes the Almighty in one verse, in a very short form. Then verse number 10, we'll take this verse, last verse today. वह भक्ति युक्त पुरुष अंत काल में भी योग बल से भ्रकुटी के मध्य में प्राणों को अच्छी तरह स्थापित करके फिर निश्चल मन से स्मरण करता हुआ उस दिव्य पुरुष परमात्मा को प्राप्त होता है. Now this is an exercise which some people who have experience can tell you better. But I can tell you that with the power of meditation, you can certainly put your pran in the mastak. That is possible. I have tried this. You can pull all your pranic energy up there and it can stay there. And particularly when a person is dying, at that time, if you are able to do this, then you can leave your body through your what we call sahastra chakra. From there's a small little, light spot in the head. If you see a small child who is born, there's a very soft spot here in the middle of the head. That randra is the one through which you can leave your life force. Now, it is said that life force, when one leaves from this particular spot, then it is a symbol that you will not come back in this universe. You have attained moksha. And that is why in the past, some people, when they died, you found their skull was having a sort of crack. And that crack appeared because you left your pranic energy from that area. And that also gave birth to the tradition of breaking the skull after you burn the dead body of a person. The whole tradition of breaking the skull starts from there. By breaking the skull, one feels that you are leading to his complete liberation, to his moksha, which is not true, but this is how the tradition has come up. So people can leave their pran, their life force at the end, through any of the senses. You can live through your, through your eyes, through your ears, through your mouth, through your ears, and also through your, sexual organs. So the pranas leave the body through one of these holes. One of these holes, 9 gates they talk about. The 2 gates at the bottom, the the sense of evacuation and the sense of procreation. And then you have two eyes, two nose, one mouth, and two ears. These are nine gates. If you leave your prana through one of these nine gates, then you are supposed to come back. But if you leave your prana through this, then it is certain that you are not going to come back. That is one of the explanations given in Vedic literature and also by many people who have written on this subject. Uh, One may or may not agree with this, but here Lord Krishna is saying that if you are able to bring up your pranic energy at the end when you are about to die, bring it up in your skull in this area, and then you leave your prana, then you are going to attain the Almighty. This is what he's saying. He is not specifically mentioning this Randra here. He is not specifically mentioning Sahasrahar Chakra either, but he's saying that you bring up the pranic energy up here, and then if you leave your pranic energy at the time of death that way, then you are certain to attain the Almighty. So let us take it in that spirit that you can, it is possible, it is absolutely possible to bring the pranic energy upwards, because I have seen it myself, I have experienced it myself, I have tried it myself. You can take the entire pranic energy up and put it here, or somewhere in this part of your body. That is absolutely possible. And then if you are able to leave your pranic energy at that time, then, but this is a very complicated thing, I cannot explain you, because this can be explained only by those who have experienced it, so I cannot say that. But basically it must be true, that is why he's saying it. And the tradition of breaking the skull after we burn the dead body arises from here, that the pranic energy has left through this route. But I certainly know some people, some saints who died, and after death, their skull was found with a crack. So that is a fact that exists. I have seen and heard this in person, and therefore I believe that this is absolutely true, that normally we leave our pranic energy through one of the nine gates, but otherwise you can also leave through this 10th gate, and that is the gate of moksha, that is for sure. So I think we can try this sometime, how to put the pranic energy up in the skull and keep it there for a while. That we can do even at the time of our meditation. That's possible. So I would conclude our session today with these words. Thank you so much. And if you have any queries, I'll try to answer them. Thank you.